You wake to the clatter of hooves on cobblestones, the air heavy with the scent of smouldering olive oil lamps, and the faint rot of the Tiber River snaking through Rome's heart. It's 48 AD, deep in the night, and you're crouched in a shadowed alcove of the imperial palace, your back pressed against cool marble, the rough weave of your tunic catching on jagged stone. Beyond the silk curtains which sway like spectres in the draught come murmurs of laughter, gasps, and the clink of goblets, sounds of a world you're forbidden to fully enter. Your pulse races. You're a mere servant, invisible to the nobles, yet close enough to catch whispers of scandal. Valeria Messalina, the Empress herself, slipping out under a hooded cloak, her eyes gleaming with a reckless fire that could burn the empire to ash. The heat clings to your skin, even in the pre-dawn chill, and fear knots your stomach. One misstep, one overheard secret, and the Praetorians' blades will find you before the sun breaches the Palatine Hill. Before diving into these forgotten stories of survival and suffering, if you enjoy learning about the hidden truths of history, consider hitting that like button and subscribing for more content like this. And please comment below to let me know where you're listening from. I find it incredible that we're exploring these ancient stories together from different parts of the world, connected across time and space by our shared curiosity about the past. Gather closer now, let the fire's crackle weave through the tale, its embers casting light on a Rome both dazzling and decayed. This is no dry recounting from dusty scrolls, but a story alive with the grit of the streets, the perfume of opulent villas, and the dread of those who walked the empire's edges. We'll unravel the life of Valeria Messalina, Empress of Rome, whose name became a byword for excess, and delve into the silent horrors endured by the male concubines, the pleura delicati, whose suffering was as commonplace as the bread baked in the Subura's ovens. The sources, Tacitus, Suetonius, Cassius Dio, Juvenal, Pliny, offer us fragments, pieced together here not to judge but to witness, to feel the pulse of a world where power was a blade, sharp and unforgiving. Valeria Messalina was born around 20 AD into a family where ambition and lineage intertwined like the ivy creeping up Rome's ancient walls. Her father, Marcus Valerius Messala Babatus, a consul whose ancestors had carved their names into the Republic's triumphs, held court in a domus where wax masks of forebears stared from alcoves, their eyes hollow yet commanding. Her mother, Domitia Lepida the Younger, was a daughter of the elite, sister to Nero's father and cousin to Caligula, whose laughter echoed through the Palatine's halls before his madness consumed them. Messalina's earliest memories would have been of summer heat baking the terracotta roofs, of slaves moving silently with trays of figs and wine, their bare feet whispering over mosaics depicting gods in eternal revelry. The Tiber's breeze carried scents of baked bread from the Subura and the faint decay of fish hauled from its muddy banks, a reminder that Rome's grandeur rested on labor and loss. As a child, Messalina would have wandered the Palatine's gardens, where fountains sprayed arcs of water that caught the sunlight, scattering rainbows over laurel hedges. She might have traced her fingers along frescoes of nymphs dancing with satyrs, their painted eyes seeming to follow her, or listened to her mother's hushed conversations with senators' wives, their voices sharp with the politics of marriage and alliance. Childhood in such a world was fleeting. By 38 AD, at perhaps 18, she was bound to Claudius, a man of 48, whose physical frailties, his limp, his stammer, the droop of his mouth, made him a figure of mockery among the elite. Claudius, born in 10 BC to Drusus and Antonia Minor, had survived the Julio-Claudian intrigues by burying himself in scholarship, his hands ink-stained from copying histories while his kin plotted in gilded chambers. Their wedding was a spectacle of power, not love. Priests chanted under a canopy of silk, the air thick with incense, while guests in togas embroidered with gold whispered of alliances sealed in bloodlines. The marriage bore fruit quickly. In 39 or 40 AD, Claudia Octavia was born, a delicate girl with her mother's dark, searching eyes, swaddled in linens dyed with Tyrian purple. In 41 AD came Tiberius Claudius Germanicus, later called Britannicus, a boy whose birth coincided with a Rome on the brink of chaos. That same year, Caligula met his end, his body torn by daggers in a palace corridor, the stone floor slick with his blood as torches sputtered in their sconces. The Praetorian Guard, their armour clanking in the night, found Claudius cowering behind a curtain, his breath shallow with terror. They hailed him emperor, dragging him to the Senate, where senators, their faces pale under lamplight, acclaimed him to avoid the mob's wrath. Messalina, barely 21, became empress, her presence aflame in a court of shadows. The imperial palace was a world of contrasts. Marble halls gleamed under torchlight, but the air carried whispers of betrayal. Messalina moved through it with a predator's grace, her silken stolas brushing against frescoes of Venus and Adonis, her laughter bright yet edged with calculation. She learned to navigate the court's currents, aligning with Claudius's freedmen, men like Narcissus, whose cunning eyes missed nothing, and Pallas, whose wealth surpassed that of senators. These former slaves, risen to power through wit and loyalty, became her tools, drafting edicts and weaving accusations to secure her place. Tacitus in Annals Book 11 describes her as a force of ambition, her mind as sharp as the daggers hidden in senators' cloaks. In 42 AD, her gaze fell on Appius Junius Silanus, a senator of noble birth whom she'd arranged to wed her mother, Domitia Lepida. When Silanus rebuffed her, perhaps seeing the danger in her advances, she spun a tale of treason, her voice low and urgent in Narcissus's ear. Tacitus recounts the scene. Claudius, roused from sleep by the freedman's whispers, his face ashen in the flickering light of a single lamp, ordering Silanus's execution without trial. The man's cries rang out at dawn, his blood staining the Gemonian stairs, a grim staircase where traitors' bodies were displayed. The crowd's murmurs rose like a tide, their sandals scuffing the dust as they dispersed, fear settling over Rome like a fog. Messalina's influence reached into the private chambers of the powerful. Suetonius, in Life of Claudius, chapter 26, tells of her pursuit of Menister, a Greek actor whose performances drew gasps in the theatre. His movements fluid as water, she summoned him to her chambers, where rosewater scented the air and silk curtains muffled their voices. Her demands were laced with threats: comply or face exile, or worse. Their encounters unfolded in shadows, the candlelight catching the sheen of sweat on skin, the actor's compliance a performance born of survival. Cassius Dio, in Roman History Book 11, records her jealousy, particularly toward Julia Livilla, Caligula's sister, whose beauty rivaled her own. In 41 AD, Messalina orchestrated Livilla's exile to Pandateria, a barren isle where the wind howled and starvation was a slow death. Livilla's letters, smuggled by loyal slaves, spoke of hunger and cold, her once lustrous hair matted, her body wasting under the relentless sun. The tales of Messalina's appetites burn brightest in Rome's memory, though their truth is tangled in satire and slander. Juvenal in Satire 6, lines 114-30, describes her nocturnal escapes to the Subura, Rome's underbelly, where alleys reeked of spilled ale and unwashed bodies. Disguised as Lysiska, a common prostitute, she worked in brothels where straw pallets scratched skin and oil lamps smoked. Her cloak concealed imperial rings, but her eyes betrayed a hunger no coin could sate. She returned at dawn, coal-smudged, her limbs heavy, yet Juvenal claimed she was unfulfilled, her purse jingling with the night's earnings. Pliny the Elder, in Natural History Book 10, chapter 83, elevates this to legend. In 48 AD, she challenged Scylla, a prostitute famed for her stamina, to a contest of endurance, who could bed more men in a single day and night. Messalina, the tale goes, claimed victory with 25 lovers, her body aching, her breath ragged, as cheers echoed outside, the crowd unaware their empress was the victor. Tacitus, in Annals 11, cautions that such stories, while grounded in her reckless nature, were amplified by enemies, particularly Agrippina, whose memoirs fueled Rome's gossip. Yet Messalina was more than her scandals. She was a mother who shielded her children from the court's venom. Britannicus, with his father's love for books, played in the palace gardens, chasing lizards under laurel trees, the scent of roses masking the whispers of intrigue. Octavia, delicate and quiet, was betrothed to Lucius Junius Silanus in 41 AD, a match Messalina arranged to bind her daughter to a noble line, though it later unravelled. Claudius, consumed by his conquest of Britain in 43 AD, where legions slogged through marshes, their boots sinking in mud as they raised standards under grey skies, left Rome to Messalina's command, his trust a fragile thread stretched across the empire. Her unravelling began with Gaius Silius, consul designate in 48 AD, whose ambition matched his beauty. Tacitus describes their affair, clandestine meetings in villas where ivy clung to columns, their bodies tangled on couches strewn with petals, his whispers of rebellion stirring her blood. In Claudius's absence at Ostia, inspecting grain ships bobbing on waves that shimmered like polished bronze, they staged a mock wedding. The ceremony was a bacchanal, guests draped in grapevines, flutes trilling, Messalina's veil fluttering as she laughed, her eyes bright with defiance. Narcissus, sensing treason, rode to Ostia, his chariot wheels churning dust to warn Claudius. The emperor returned under cover of night, the carriage jolting over uneven roads, his face a mask of betrayal. The confrontation was chaos. Praetorians stormed Silius's home, finding imperial treasures, gifts from Messalina, amid scattered goblets and wilted flowers. She fled to the gardens of Lucullus, their paths lined with cypresses that swayed like mourners. Demortia, her mother, pressed a dagger into her hands, urging suicide. Tacitus captures her hesitation, tears streaming, the blade trembling, the grass cold beneath her knees. She faltered, a tribune's sword struck, blood soaking the earth. Claudius, dining later, asked after her with a voice devoid of warmth, as if grief had carved him hollow. The Senate decreed damnatio lumobiari. Her statues toppled, their crashes echoing through empty plazas, her name chiselled from history. Now, turn your eyes to a darker truth, one woven into Rome's very stones, the lives of the pueri delicati, boys whose youth was a commodity in a world where power demanded submission. These were not mere slaves but captives, often no older than 10, plucked from markets in Rome, Alexandria, or conquered lands like Gaul or Judea, their beauty a currency traded among the elite. Suetonius, in Tiberius chapter 43, draws us to Capri in 27 AD, where the emperor retreated to cliffs overlooking a sea that roared like a beast. His villa, perched where gulls wheeled and salt spray stung, housed troops of boys, fair-haired Germans, dark-eyed Syrians, their skin oil to gleam under torchlight. They performed in grottos where water dripped, the air heavy with myrrh, their movements choreographed to please a man whose whims were law. Castration was common, the surgeon's knife a cold violation, followed by weeks in dim cells where pain lingered like a shadow. The boys' fear was a constant, eyes darting, hands trembling as they poured wine or endured worse, knowing defiance meant the lash or banishment to mines where rocks crushed bones. Petronius's Satyricon, through Trimalchio's feasts, mocks yet reveals this world, boys circulating among guests, their laughter brittle, tunics hiding welts from rough hands. Seneca, in Letters to Lucilius, letter 47, laments their plight. Youths trained to endure nightly torments, their smiles masks for dread. A master's favour might bring gifts, gold rings clinking on wrists, but rejection meant sale to brothels where palates scratched skin and clients cared little for gentleness. Roman law offered no shield. Slaves were property, their bodies tools for pleasure or profit, their consent a whisper no one heeded. Nero's reign pushed this to grotesque extremes. In 67 AD, Suetonius writes in Nero chapter 28, he fixated on Sporus, a boy whose likeness to Poppaea haunted him, castrated in a ceremony where blades glinted and blood stained the floor. Sporus was dressed in veils, paraded as Empress through Rome's streets, his litter swaying as crowds gawked. Their wedding was a spectacle of excess, tables laden with roasted peacock, Nero's hands possessive on skin still raw. Sporus endured public kisses in the Forum, the sun relentless, until Nero's fall in 68 AD left him to Vitellius and others, his suicide a final act of defiance against shame. Martial's epigrams, Book 9, speak of Elerinos, Domitian's favourite in the 80s AD, a boy whose castration mocked the emperor's own ban of 82 AD. The contradiction was stark. Laws shifted, but villas still housed youths trained to please, their identities erased. In households across the empire, from Ostia's humid baths to Antioch's dusty estates, this was routine. Slaves from Claudius's British campaigns, their hair matted with mud, were sold in markets where buyers prodded flesh like livestock. Groomed in baths where steam rose and iron singed scalps, they learned to suppress flinches, knowing rebellion brought lashes that tore skin like cloth. Quintilian, in Institutes of Oratory, Book 7, notes parents flaunting these boys before their children, embedding the practice in Rome's culture. In Pompeii, graffiti scratched into bathhouse walls, names, pleas, curses hint at their despair. On frontiers, legionaries kept their own, their tents filled with the clink of armour and stifled sobs. Even as Hadrian strengthened bans on castration in 1117 AD, the trade persisted in shadows, the boy's silence a scream no one heard. Messalina's tale and the delicacies suffering are threads in Rome's tapestry, a city of marble and blood, where desire fueled both glory and ruin. Her contest, whether truth or myth, mirrors the boy's endurance, both trapped in a world that exalted power over humanity. The fire's embers fade now, their glow faint as the lives erased by history's march. Yet their whispers linger in the ash, urging us to see the cost of empire paid in flesh and fear beneath the laurels and the cheers.